Welcome to the Lean on Agile show. I'm your host, Shahin, and I have a great friend of mine, Dr. Andreas Rein from Germany. I got to know him through the Kanban community. He's an AKT and AKC, and I'm very happy to have him in our show to speak to him. Thanks, Andreas, to accept my invitation and being on the show.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited.
No problem. So tell us, who is Andreas?
Who's Andreas? Yeah, interesting. Let me start. Who's Andreas? I didn't expect that question. I started 25 years ago as a software developer. So in the 1990s, when the internet was coming up, I got excited and I started programming, and I worked for an internet agency developing shop systems, payment systems, and it was a cool time because everything was possible. Not so much was invented, and the prices paid were good until 2002. Then everything changed, but until then it was quite cool. But who's Andreas? Andreas is the person who worked as a software developer for 5 years and then found out that he was not passionate enough. I wasn't too bad, but other people were simply better because they were much more technology driven than I was. And I found more or less by mistake that my passion and my interest lies in project management. And so I switched from development to managing projects, and that was also quite cool in the software environment in the early 2000s. And I very soon got in contact with what was later called Agile methods. It was not Scrum, but I was working for a company, for a finance company, and they developed following the rules of extreme programming, XP. And that was very cool because it was cyclical and it was iterative and it was working in small groups and working very efficiently. And that was my first contact with the Agile community. My first real Agile project was in 2005, I guess, for a major German media company. That was a Scrum project. It was my first Scrum project. It was, ironically, a team which had decided on implementing Scrum for themselves to improve themselves. And I was there as a classical project manager, as a freelance project manager. I was there to introduce the waterfall concepts, to introduce classical project management for them, because they were so frustrated in their organization that they said, we don't want to work in sprints anymore. We don't want to work with a backlog anymore. We don't want to do all this user story stuff. We want to have a classical project management approach. And I was there to teach them how to do that. It was very sad for the team because they were really frustrated. But I guess in that project, I learned so many things about what is Agile thinking, what is the Agile mindset, what does agility mean for a company, that I still mention this project, although it was the other way around. It was not introducing the methods. And it catched me because I really like this concept of being adaptive and going away from, when you think of classical project management, the success measure more or less was, are we sticking to the plan? So you have a plan, a project plan, and the project plan is based on a forecast. And are we within the forecast, yes or no? If yes, the project is fine. But nobody cares for the result of the project. So are we creating a great product? Do our customers really like what we are doing? That's not in the concept. And I was catched by that, by these concepts, by these ideas. And then in 2009 around, I found, also more or less by mistake, I found Lean Six Sigma. So I did a Six Sigma training. I did my green belt. I did my black belt, and that was interesting because it matched very good with the agile method. So agility helped us to get rid of the plan in a way to do a more adaptive planning, and Six Sigma helped us to measure the success of what we were doing. So I really liked that. And then 2010, 2011, I was on a training for, I guess it was Prince 2. Yeah, it was a Prince 2 training. And the trainer who provided the training was from the Netherlands. And he told me, there is something new coming up. Take a look at it. It might be cool for what you're doing. And he said, it's called Kanban.
Okay.
Magic. It's from Japan. It's so cool. Yeah. And he introduced me to the main concepts and the core ideas of Kanban. And that was so great because it's so easy. It's so visual. And you have all the tools you need to steer through projects, to manage projects, to get an overview of what the people are doing, to avoid overburdening of the people working in the project. So it was an eye opener for me. And well, after that, I changed the way I was working very much because I started using Kanban all the time. Then 4 years later, around 2015, a colleague called me and said, well, we're going to a Kanban workshop and we need a third person to get a special pricing. So would you like to join us? And I thought, well, nah, I know lots about Kanban. Yeah, okay, let's go there. And that's where I met Klaus Leopold. And that was a real booster for me because on one hand, it was the first time that I was explained Kanban from the beginning to the end. So all the concepts behind it, the concept of matrix, which was not in my world. I had enough metrics from the Six Sigma world, but Kanban introduced metrics for people who are not statisticians. Yeah, so you could do it by on the fly by simply working. And the second thing Klaus did, he introduced me to his flight level thinking, using Kanban not only for teams but also for whole organizations, and that was the mind blower. And this is where it all began. And that's me.
Yeah, that sounds like a very interesting journey to have. Like I have questions from the days that you're at development. So I asked that question and I get us back to the Kanban times of yours, but I'm really interested in understanding or finding out, how did you find out your passion? Because I have gone through the same journey as well. Like I found out that there are better developers out there than me. There are more passionate people, and I needed to find my passion. So what was there a turning point for you that you can share? Was there anything that you remember of that time?
I remember when I was working with really good developers, and I met some real good developers. They were really in it. They lived for coding. They lived for finding solutions. And after having found the solution, improving the solution. For me, it was always, there's a question that needs to be answered by software code. And if the answer is there, I was fine. Then I could go out and have a beer with my friends. Real passionate developers would never do that. They would say, okay, this is the first solution. Now let's improve it. Now let's make it perfect. And I never had that drive. And it took some time to find it out. But that was the main difference between me and them.
Right. So, but it seems that you had that drive when it comes to project management, because you have two great lengths, right? You learn Prince 2, you learn Lean Six Sigma, you learn Agile, you learn Scrum, you learn Kanban, and you flight levels, invested into Kanban, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, I'm totally fascinated by the concept. I studied psychology later. I'm totally fascinated by the concept of what is a modern organization and how do organizations work. And when you look at classical organizations, you all have these hierarchical structures, you know, control and command. And a modern organization is more like an organism. Yeah, it's of course it has its major intelligence. Yeah, there's a brain, but when you think of the human brain, it's a network. Yeah, you have a region in the brain which is accountable for the strategy, where to go. But all the other brain regions, they have their functions as well, and the brain keeps changing depending on the questions asked and depending on the challenges to be taken. And this is how I see an organization. And I find the concept of organizations thought as organisms absolutely fascinating. And yeah, this is where I found my passion. So developing organizations, helping organizations to change their ways of working, to be more adaptive. This really drives me, and every method that helps.
Right. And then you talked like at least twice about being adaptive. How adaptive was Kanban for you? Because I felt like you ended up using Kanban based on what you said, like moving forward, right, for everything. But did you find anything that was not adaptive or customizable in Kanban?
The short answer is no.
Right.
The longer answer is it took some time for me to understand. When I started with Kanban, it was clear for me it's a method located in the business of software development. You know,
right.
where it took quite a while for me to understand that it's not a method for software development. It's a method for visualizing value streams. And every part of the organization that creates value, and hopefully most parts and organizations create value, can be modeled in a Kanban system. And so I worked for the legal department of a financial service provider, so far away from software development. So they used Kanban to model their workflow and to model their value flow, and that was absolutely mind-breaking. It took some time for me to understand that, but that's why I say the answer is no. Everyone in the organization can use Kanban. I'm convinced of that. Yeah.
Right. And what is the easiest way for people to get to the position that you are in, to understand Kanban fully, that they see Kanban in its true value that it can bring? Any suggestions, any recommendations?
Yeah, the first step, I guess, is try it, experiment it, and see what it means to work with concepts like WIP limits. Yeah. This is you can be part of an experiment, of a flow experiment, where you can experience that. You can maybe hear a great explanation about that. In a way, WIP limitation is counterintuitive, because when you tell the people you have to limit the work in order to get faster, most people think, hey, what are you talking about? Yeah, if you want to get more work done, you need to work on more, and this is wrong. Right. You can prove that with Kanban. And once this understanding is in the people's minds, they are interested in what can I do with it? How can I model it with it? And then I would always say, okay, you should be trained professionally. So professional training is, I guess, also a very important step to understand and to find out which parts of the Kanban method are important for you to introduce in the first step.
Right. If you don't mind, I want to add something on the professionally being trained. I'm currently working in an engagement that I'm working from the team level to the leadership level, and one of the one of the findings that I realized these days is that I knew that, but I realized that in firsthand that the Kanban training that we have is not like other training that is specified for leadership, specified for team members, specified for a management level. We have the same training that we can apply at the leadership level, at the team level, at the management level. So they were asking me to, okay, so do a Kanban training for leadership. I'm like, oh, okay, so the Kanban training that I want to do for the leadership would be the same thing that I do for the team members, right? Why? And then it came to my mind that other frameworks that is out there, they have leadership training, they have this training, they have that kind of training, right? So it was an aha moment for me after a couple of years of teaching as well. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is cool. So but it shows how general, not how general, how applicable it is, right? This Kanban, and behind it is a method. It's not a framework, it's not a technique, it's a method, right? You can pick and choose like the way that you want. But I want to get back to you on telling us, you have, so some of the people that I talk to, like I would ask you this question, that you experience Scrum, you experience Agile without the Scrum, you experienced other methodology, Prince 2, as you said, Lean Six Sigma. Was it the incompetency that you have in any one of them that led you into believing that those are not good enough and you move to Kanban? Or was it that you find something that, for example, when I talk to the Scrum folks, they typically say you didn't do a Scrum right. If you were doing a Scrum right, you wouldn't need to move on to anything else, right? So what are your thoughts on those kind of discussions that we see?
Mm-hmm. Now, yeah, thinking of Scrum, for example. So Scrum is an excellent method. I really love Scrum. But you have to know what you can do with it. So Scrum is great for developing things. You have a backlog, you have a description of what you want to deliver, and then you have this iterative way of sprinting and reviewing the artifacts you are producing in order to build a product in the end, which is very, very related, closely related to your customers' wishes and desires. This is perfect. When it comes to, but where do the backlog items come from? How do I fill up my backlog? I'm not sure if Scrum is the perfect method for that part of the journey, let's say. So Scrum is a perfect method for the question of delivery or working in projects, for example. When you think of line management, so business as usual, where people do the work that simply has to be done every day, Scrum, I think, is not the perfect method, because if you work on many work items which are not logically related to each other, it's very hard to provide a review at the end. And if you cannot do the review, the event of the review, one major force in Scrum is lost. It's just not there. And then Scrum is not the perfect method. Design thinking, when it comes to creativity, is very, very cool if you want to find out what is it your customer really wants, what do you want to deliver. But design thinking as a method does not help you to deliver it. Kanban is, for me, it embraces all these methods, because in Kanban, we don't say, we look at how the people work, but we look at how they create value. So they can work with design thinking in the beginning of our Kanban board or Kanban work stream, and later they can work with Scrum. It really doesn't matter. Another thing I found with Scrum is, and I'm not sure if this is a typical German problem or or a cultural problem here. When companies decide, well, the economical environment is changing, so for some reason we are not performing as we are used to, so we have to change something. Then they go to to a conference and someone says you need to become agile, and they decide, okay, let's get agile. So let's introduce Scrum because it's maybe the most famous or best known methods. They start transforming their teams and turning them into Scrum teams. And then you have, I don't know, 10 Scrum teams. And the organization says, okay, 80% of our teams are now transformed to Scrum, so we are 80% agile. And this totally goes wrong because there's one missing link, and that brings me to the flight level concept, which is based on Kanban, where we say we have three perspectives to look at the organization. We have level 1, which is the operational level. This is where the people really work. We have level 2, which is the end-to-end workflow. It's the coordinative level. And we have level 3, which is the strategical level, where we decide what our company should work on. Level 3, the strategy, is there. Most companies have that. If they do it good or maybe not so good, it's not the question, but some strategic level is there. The operational level is also there. Now imagine a company where 80% of the teams are transformed into Scrum teams. Even if they are cross-functional, they have dependencies. They cannot avoid dependencies because you always have shared services. At some point in time, you need the marketing department, you need the legal department, you need HR, whoever. Yeah. Right. How does that fit with the Scrum team? And therefore, implementing this flight level 2, this coordination level, helps us to coordinate between teams and between shared services. And this solves the problem Scrum alone, from my perspective, does not solve. Right. In so far, Kanban as a method or flight level as a thinking model embraces all these methods and connects them with strategy. And this is the magic for me. And that really works very, very well. And what you said before, sorry, I'm talking too much, but
no, this is for you. This is
what you said before, your aha moment when you notice that no matter where in the organization you introduce Kanban, it's self-similar. You understand it. So even if the C-level people who work with Kanban look at a operational board on team level, they understand what they're doing because they understand the idea behind it. It's the same in flight levels. So the system is always, so what we do is always the same. The difference is what the work items look like. And this is what we need to work on. So on the strategic level, the work item definitely looks very, very different compared to the work item we look at when we are on the team level, where we look at tasks. Yeah. So it breaks down. It's a cascade of work flowing through the organization. But I'm absolutely on your side. It's a self-similar system. If you understood how it works, you can look at any part of the organization and you understand how the work is organized or how the work is being managed.
Right. I think you mentioned this, that is very simple method to use, but it might be very hard to implement it, right? So that's that is what Kanban is. So how one begins with Kanban in organizations? Where do you typically begin? You are a consultant. When you are called in, how do you start your engagement? Tell us more about that. Tell us our audience more about that.
Yeah. So when I start working with organizations, it's mainly the question of how to implement business agility. So getting rid of this 80% of our teams are agile now. How can we really implement business agility? And I think a good practice to start is identifying a flight level 2 system. So in Kanban we say an organization is a network of systems of Kanban boards in a way. Right. So a good way would be find a value stream end to end through the organization, which can be modeled as maybe as a pilot or as a proof of concept, whatever, and start developing, designing a board, a flow, which represents this end-to-end flow, beginning at where does our work come from? So the strategic entry or wherever your work comes from, and ending with delivery to the customer or whoever might be the part of the or other part of the organization, whoever is whoever works with what we're delivering. So a good practice is to model this end-to-end stream, because it's a logical story we can tell the people. We can identify the people we need, because we know who should be working on that board, on that system. And then, most important, implement, design it is the first step. Design the board, design the system with the people who are affected by it. Never try to do it for the people. And it's the same with Kanban. Never build a board for a team and then tell them, here's your board, now work with it. You always have to engage the people to build their own board.
If I may say, I find this to be the hardest part of the consulting piece for Kanban. Don't you find it hard? Because they get you there, based on the experience that they have or expectation is they expect you to deliver something, to design that. And you're going there and saying that, oh, I'm going to work with you to design your system with you, right? So I'm not sure if it's only my experience, but I find it that typically when I get clients, they are like, okay, so you are not designing the board? I'm like, no, I need to tell them, I need to educate them, get them that the best people to design the board would be the people that are doing the job, right? So I need to get the management level to understand that first, and then go and design the board with them, because that's you hit the nail, hit the point for me there.
When I start an engagement, just like you do, I almost immediately tell them, I will not build your board.
Oh, okay, yeah, I should have that policy explicit too.
I even go further. I also say, I'm not even sure if a board is your solution. Right. Because the first thing we need to find out is, what is your problem? Right. And then you can start talking with the people. Okay, what is the pressure you have? What is the main thing you want to improve? Is it time to market? Is it overburdening, avoiding the overburdening of people? What is it? And then you can go into the thinking mode with the people and just reflect with them what would help you, or what could be helpful for you. Right. And then the board, or working with the board, could be a suggestion from my side. And in most cases, people involved and people who know that you understood the problem or the pain they have say they understand it, and they say, okay, let's do it. What would our board look like? And then we can do a board building workshop. But I never do it for people. It doesn't work.
Right. So I know that we have a question coming from our audience. I know Akim is having a question, so please go ahead, Akim, for Andreas.
Yeah, thank you, Shahin. Appreciate it. Andreas, it's been very insightful. I think a lot of the things you said so far is relatable. But some of the things that you said, I just had a question around them. And when you talk about dependency, like I get, Kanban is one of the frameworks that a lot of folks in the Agile space are pushing for now, because they believe it's more effective over Scrum, right? Scrum has been promoted for a very long period of time, but a lot of Agilists are saying, you know what, Scrum has been good, it's shown its effectiveness, but Kanban is a much better fit for a lot of things that a lot of organizations do today in terms of value delivery. So I had a question around, like how you mentioned, there's, in Scrum, you're going to have dependencies, et cetera, between teams, because there are a lot of shared services that are being tapped into in terms of being able to deliver software or deliver value to the customer. But won't you say in the same way or in the same vein, Kanban does expose dependencies within teams that, let's say, delivering software to an end user, delivering some piece of value to a user that's potentially usable or shippable or, of value at the end of the day. Won't you say that dependencies do exist in that framework as well? Or how does it differ? How would the dependencies differ? Dependencies, in my opinion, are dependencies, right? We get, regardless of whichever way you look at it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And this is a very good point. You always have dependencies in an organization. You cannot avoid dependencies. And it's if you try to avoid dependencies, you waste your energy. Well, it's important to understand where the dependencies are and how to handle them. And therefore, and this is why I'm such a fan of flight level thinking is, so if you have a Kanban system for a team, or maybe you have one team working with Scrum and one team working with Kanban and the third team just working, whatever. Yeah. They might have dependencies. It could be resources. It could be they are working on depending products. Yeah, product A, product B, but they all share, they share the same database. Yeah, it's a technical dependency. How can we make sure that these teams exchange regarding dependencies? How can we make sure that they talk about the dependencies they have? And this is what we call flight level 2. This is a dependency board. It's not a dependency, it's a coordination board between the teams. So it's higher aggregated. We don't see the tasks, but we see maybe the user stories the teams are working on. And representatives of the teams meet on this higher level flight level board in order to exactly discuss their dependencies. Team A tells Team B, we are working on this, and Team B understands that there is a dependency, so they have to exchange. So when we think in flows, so work items flow through the organization, we always need to be aware of what is the trigger of the flow? And the trigger of the flow normally is information and communication. And a coordination board, which is above the team boards, helps us trigger exactly the information and helps us designing the information flow through the organization. You cannot avoid dependencies, but you can make sure that the people know about them, and that they know where the dependencies are, and you can foster communication in order to let the teams interact in a way that they can handle the dependencies.
If I may add to what you guys said, as you said, Andreas, dependencies are there, like no matter like if it's Agile, Waterfall, Kanban, Scrum, whatever it is, dependencies are going to be there. The only difference with Kanban would be, what I find is, it's first of all, it's not going to be disruptive with the way that you are going to introduce a new method. So it's going to work with the method that you have. So probably in your own method, or your ways of working, you have dependency management, right? And then it's going to help you identify if this dependency management that you have is a bottleneck for you. Is it making your flow not as smooth as possible? Is it a challenge for the flow? And if that's so you can have some sort of, as Andrea said, a flight level 2 coordination meeting, or what we typically do is start from a service and then expand it to the upstream service of that, right? Or to expand it to the downstream of service of that, with the ones that have more or less dependencies, right? So just the way that Kanban approaches the dependencies would be different, in my opinion. I'm not sure if Andreas, you have the same mind, because I think at the end of the day, everywhere would be dependencies, right? And if you are as you said, we are not SAFe experts, but I'm sure SAFe has its own version of handling dependencies. Everyone has their own version of it. Like, we are just saying that based on our experiences, handling dependencies must be, it feels like, as you said, lightweighter compared to other, at least. Like, for example, my experience in Scrum was that for managing these things, we need to have a Scrum of a Scrum. We need to have another layer on top of what we are doing, another layer of language, as you brought it up, Epic, stories feature that you brought it up, Akim, and then we have to agree upon that, what we call the whole, like what we call Epic, what we call a story, what we call task. But in Kanban, everyone can do everything they want. Like, one team, as Andreas said, could be Scrum, one team could be Kanban, one team could be Waterfall, and we are just looking at the flow and we are managing the work. So it would be easier to manage the dependencies. And I guess, like, I find it this way, funny, or not funny, but simple enough, that it's very simple to say it, but when it comes to practicing it, it's complicated. And until you practice it, I'm not sure if you agree with me or not, Andreas, until you practice it, you wouldn't understand the nooks and crannies of it. And then after you practice, you find that, oh, this was simple, and I made it a little bit complicated in the practice, but it was simple. So I'm doing a case study, and the whole case study that I'm doing on Kanban is it's a simple method. So I just want, like, as I said, like, everything would be simple then. Your thoughts? Do you find it simple, Andreas, or do you find it complicated to go about Kanban?
It is very simple. The complicated part is, as I said before, it's counterintuitive. So when you ask people in charge in an organization, what do you think? How should your resource allocation be? What do most people say? 100%, better 120. Yeah. What I show then is a picture of the German Autobahn, the German highway, around Frankfurt, Monday morning at 8, which is a traffic jam. There's nothing going. And I tell them, this is 70% resource allocation. So you have 4 lanes, which are your resources, and 70% of them are allocated by cars. So you can put more work on the system. You can put 100% resource allocation on the system. But can you tell me then how much time it may take to come to the next exit from the Autobahn? No, you can't. And this is the blockade, I guess, or this is the counterintuitiveness we need to solve. Once this is understood, that we need to have free space in order to move, that we need to have capacity which is able to move the work through the system, that it's not a good idea to start too many things at the same time, because the people do task switching all the time then, which is also very inefficient. Then it starts to become easy. But this part of the story is very, very hard to understand when you come from a traditional organization, when you come from university, I don't know, have an MBA or something, because you learned the exact opposite of what we are saying, proving and living and working when using Kanban. So once you understood that, it is simple. Then you can really easily implement that, and you can keep improving. Yes, but starting and understanding that limitation, prioritizing, thinking about what to work on next. I mean, prioritizing does not mean saying what to work on. Prioritizing means saying what not to work on. And this is very, very hard to understand for the C-level people. So this is, in my opinion, the toughest part.
Right. One question that I have for you, came to my mind. I'm not sure if you have the answer for it or you can share your insight. Maybe you should ask Klaus about this one. So when you were talking about the flight levels, I immediately think that people that might not be knowing Kanban that much or not knowing flight levels would imagine that this is Kanban at a scale. So what are your thoughts on that? Is this Kanban at a scale, flight levels?
Well, I wouldn't disagree as a first reaction. Yes. Okay. So call it whatever you want. It's a way of representing an organization in the flow-based system. So what we do in flight levels is we try to design the organization as what we call systems architecture. So we first think about what flight level 1 systems do we need? What do we think? Where do we need flight level 2 systems for coordination purposes? And where does the strategy work happen in the organization? Another question is, does all the work in the organization come from strategy, or are there other paths? Yeah, and the answer is yes, of course. Not every work being done is strategical work. Looking at the boards on flight level 2 and flight level 1, you see Kanban boards, definitely. Right. The strategic board looks a little different because on the strategic level, normally you don't have a flow in that sense. It's more about it's more about objectives and maybe working with OKR, objectives, key results, and actions to identify strategical flight items. But if you want to call it Kanban at scale, yeah, call it Kanban at scale.
I'm not a fan of that wording, but I'm just saying, right, if for naive people that are looking for expanding it, right? So for flight levels, how people can begin learning about that? Do you have good resources that you can share with us?
The best resource, I think for now, the only resource is the book by Klaus Leopold. It's called Rethinking Agile, where the flight level concept is explained in a very lightweight way with many pictures, easy to understand, based on the problems and challenges companies are facing, and then introducing the way of flight level thinking in order to solve these things. So this is a very, very good entry. It's a cool book.
Okay. And we had Klaus once on our show as well. He talked about business agility has nothing to do with teams.
Exactly.
Which was a really insightful.
It's totally right.
Yeah.
Business agility is depending on agile interaction. So how does information flow through the organization? That is what an organization makes agile. The number of agile teams. An organization can be agile with waterfall teams.
Right.
Yeah. It's hard for the Scrum community,
right.
But I still believe I'm right.
Right. We talked a lot. We talked about Kanban. We talked about flight levels. We talked about touched on dependencies a lot. We talked about Lean Six Sigma, like we talked about Prince 2. Any one of these that you learn and you advise others to learn as well. So they might not be mainstream, right? But you might say that, hey, if you guys want to be a good Kanban coach, I recommend you to be a Lean Six Sigma at least. Like, I don't know what the first belt is, like green belt, like or blue belt would be the first one.
It really, I would say it depends on your personality. So I really love Six Sigma. I later also made my master black belt. But it's based on statistics, and it's very, very data driven, and it's very mathematical. If you're in measuring if you're interested in statistics, then this is a very, very cool method. If you are not, you should not use Six Sigma, then other things might be more interesting. What I also like, it's the PMI, the Project Management Institute. So they do the classical PMP, Project Management Professional certification. This is classical project management.
Right.
They also introduced in their 7th edition of their project management body of knowledge, iterative working and agile methods. And I like that. It's not too bad because it represents the reality of many organizations. Many organizations think about working in hybrid models because they come from the traditional world. They know that they need to become more adaptive. And then this way of introducing agile thinking and agile mindset might be the right one, because it's based on what they know. It's based on the classical project management, introducing iterative ways of working. It's maybe not what the agile community likes to hear, but you asked me, and I say it's not too bad.
Yeah, and I know that PMI, they invested heavy in Agile. They acquired DAD or DAD, like the framework, and it's part of Agile. Like if you were if you were DAD certified, you are a PMI certified now, right? I don't know how that worked out, but right now, like you cannot be DAD certified anymore unless you go through PMI. So it's good that in the PM world, right, at least this mindset is flourishing, right? And we should thank them because it's going to make our lives easier if you work with the project managers that has heard of those, like think about like iterative ways of working as well, right? Thank you, Andreas. Is there anything else that we wanted to cover but we forgot to cover, or is there anything else that you want to share with us before we say goodbye?
Well, I don't know because we forgot.
Right.
So, no,
it's always.
I think we covered all the major topics.
Yeah. Would our listener be able to contact you, and if so, how would you like to be contacted if they have more questions, wanted to connect with you? What are the ways that they can do?
The easiest way is over my LinkedIn profile or my website, which is Rein, REIN -digital.com.
Okay.
Yeah, which is funny in Germany because my last name Rein translated to English would mean pure, and Rein Digital then would mean purely digital.
Okay.
Yeah, so Rein -digital.com is a good way to contact me, and there you can find some. It's in English as well, so you can switch from German to English. I have some text there. I have a reference to the book I wrote, and yeah, you can find me there.
Awesome. Any experience to share on running your own business? Because I believe Rein Digital, if I pronounce it properly, is yours, right? And how long are you running that? Tell us anything that you might want to share with us.
I started as a freelance consultant in 2004, and since then I'm on my own. As I said, I started in classical project management. I work as a trainer, and since 2011 with Kanban, and the last 5 years flight levels Kanban as an AKT and AKC. Yeah.
Right. Sounds good. Okay. Thank you, Andreas. It was a pleasure having you on the show. Really appreciated your time, and best of luck to you.